I'm a little sad. We've only got one college football game left in the year.
Yeah, it seems like just yesterday we were starting the season, and now it's over. Although, I think we're going to have a good FCS national championship game as well between North Dakota State and James Madison on Saturday.
Yeah, we had good FCS representative out here this year. Weber State got to the semifinals, got beat by James Madison in the semifinals.
That's a very good James Madison team. I was talking to East Carolina's head coach, Houston, and we were going over his team. And then I just brought back to James Madison a little bit, and he felt they would have the best defense in the FCS this year, and they certainly did. I feel that's going to be a great game for a title game.
Yeah, it should be, and I think Monday night, Phil, should be a pretty damn good game for a title game as well. It looks like it. It's shaping up on paper that way. I was talking to an NFL draft kind of projector or evaluator yesterday, and one of the guys from Pro Football Focus, and he told me there could be as many as 18 draftable athletes on the field for both teams on Monday night. That is a ton of talent.
Oh, absolutely. And, you just go back and look at the recruiting classes that these guys have been hauling in. Dabo, since Clemson got to the national championship, started winning the big ones, has been bringing in great recruiting classes every year. And LSU, despite the fact they haven't been getting past Alabama, always brings in the great personnel as well. So we've got two very talented teams, and I think it shapes up to be an excellent game.
Bill, you always look at units and groupings and things like that. I'm curious, for Clemson, which unit or group do you think gives them the biggest advantage on Monday night?
I'm going to go with the overall defense.
Okay.
I think is better for Clemson. When you look at them, led by Isaiah Simmons, a linebacker, they've held opponents to 152 yards per game, below their season average, best in the country. LSU's been playing great football the last 4 weeks. But overall on the season, they're holding opponents to 78 yards per game below the season average, which is number 20 in the country. I think I would maybe take the LSU personnel of the secondary over the Clemson personnel. But other than that, I think the overall group of the defense, I got to go with Clemson.
LSU, give me the area where you think they have the biggest advantage.
I'm going to give you two.
Okay.
One would be on the offensive line. I believe all the skill personnel are dead even. You've got two elite classes of quarterbacks, running backs, receivers. You're not going to find an edge in there. But offensive line, LSU did win the coveted Joe Moore Award for best offensive line in the country, and they've had to deal with Joe Burrow hanging onto the football a little long. So their stats may not be perfect, but I think when you look at this line and being with the Joe Moore group, I know that breaking it down, they love this offensive line. With Clemson, they've had a couple of flaws during the course of the year on the offensive line. Great stats, but remember, they haven't played 6 top 10 teams that like LSU has. So LSU is definitely taking on the tougher defenses. And then the other one would be special teams. My ratings have LSU with a pretty good size edge on the special teams as well. So I'm going to go offensive line and special teams for LSU.
It's been a narrative over the last couple of weeks that Joe Burrow has had the greatest season of any quarterback in SEC history. And I'm always one of these people. I hate those kind of platitudes. I'm one of these people, let history decide. Let's see how it plays out. And I'm old enough to have covered some pretty good SEC football. I covered the Gators when Danny Werfel and Steve Spurrier and the fun and gun was going on down there. And I'm just going through the years. But I've got to be honest, Phil. I went and looked up the numbers yesterday, and I pulled up 4 quarterbacks over the last 25 years. I pulled up Werfel at Florida. I pulled up Tebow, the 07 season at Florida. I pulled up Cam Newton's 2010 season. I also pulled up Johnny Manziel, and then I pulled up Joe Burrow this year. And I got to tell you, Phil, I think Joe Burrow may have had the greatest season of any quarterback in SEC football history.
And I would probably agree with that statement. You go back and you look at Cam Newton back in 2010. He threw for under 3,000 yards
right.
at a 30-7 ratio, but he did run for 1,473 yards. His passing stats weren't there. What he did for Auburn that year was phenomenal. But, Joe Burrow has taken out, 6 top 10 defenses and 55 touchdowns, just 6 interceptions, and really – pick out the bad game he had this year. He hasn't had a single bad game the entire season. The only time he didn't top 300 yards passing was against Florida when he had 21 of 24 passes. So there hasn't been a bad game for Joe Burrow the entire year despite a rugged schedule.
No, I'm with you, and he's even run for 4 touchdowns this year. He doesn't have the same number of rushing yards that either Manziel or Tebow or Cam Newton had, but he's thrown for over 5,000 yards. He's run for a couple of hundred yards, but he's thrown for 55 touchdowns, and he's done it against a gauntlet of a schedule. And he's also won the Heisman Trophy. And as you said, pick out the bad game, pick out the warts. Yeah, there might have been a game where he only threw for 290 yards, but it was all there. So again, I'm one of these people that doesn't like to make those huge proclamations before something's happened or finished up. And I guess to say that statistically, yes. If he doesn't win on Monday night, I'm not sure I could put him in that same class because Warfel won a national championship, Tebow won a national championship, Cam Newton won a national championship. So to me, if you want to have that crowning achievement, you've then got to close the deal on Monday night.
Yeah, most likely, although I'd still put them up there because Clemson has got a really good defense. As mentioned, number one in the country, holding opponents to 150-some-odd yards below their season average. And it would be if he has a bad game, it would be the only bad game. But what if Joe Burrow puts up 7 touchdowns and Clemson somehow, with Trevor Lawrence, beats LSU? I'm expecting a high-scoring game, so that's a possibility, and then that would not reflect on Joe Burrow.
Hey, Phil, if you were the Cincinnati Bengals and you're the GM of the Cincinnati Bengals and Trevor Lawrence is draft eligible this year and Joe Burrow is obviously draft eligible this year, which guy would you pick?
Trevor Lawrence. I think when you look at him, there's no flaws in Lawrence. Earlier in the year, he had some interception problems, but I think he was trying to do a little too much with the football. I think when you're looking at size, arm strength, he just checks every single box out there. When Trevor Lawrence is available for the draft, he'll be the top pick. So I would take Trevor Lawrence as the number one guy.
It's our buddy Phil Steele of Phil Steele's Football Magazine, philsteele.com. You can also find him up at ESPN.com, writing pieces and publications and putting stuff out for our folks at ESPN in Bristol. Before we talk about the championship game, and I want to get a thought, too, from you looking ahead to the Pac-12 next season, what'd you make of the Mike Leach departure from Pullman to go down to Starkville?
That is going to be something interesting. Can you imagine the Egg Bowl with Lane Kiffin and Mike Leach? The quotes coming off of that game are going to be phenomenal, and it'll be interesting to see the success that Mike Leach has. He did take a Texas Tech team that's never really been at the top and got them into the top 5. He took a Washington State team that's never been up there very much and got them into the top rankings at different points. So I'm fascinated with how SEC defensive coordinators are going to deal with Mike Leach's offense.
It'll be interesting to see who Washington State hires. It's not an easy place to have success, and Mike Leach had about as much sustained success as anybody, and obviously Mike Price had some too. But who might be – give me a couple of names that are out there, coaches that you like that could be a good fit at Washington State, Phil.
It's probably a whole bunch of coaches you could look at. I know Alex Grinch has been tossed around. He had a great job as the defensive coordinator there. That would be an interesting hire. But there's a lot of good group of 5 coaches out there that are just waiting to make that jump.
No doubt about it. Pac-12 next season, Utah's going to take a little bit of a step back. They've got a lot of talent in the program, but it's a lot of guys leaving the program. The Pac-12 South, for me, doesn't change a whole lot from the teams that compete for the title versus the teams that aren't. I think there's 3 teams that are in the mix again next year, and I think there's still 3 teams in the South that aren't quite there. I think Utah, USC, and ASU are still probably, in whatever order you want to put them, in the top teams. I'm not sure Colorado, UCLA, and Arizona are quite there yet. Would you agree or disagree?
Right off the cuff, I would agree with that statement. UCLA being the wild card, I know they've lost some players to the transfer portal, but you're wondering when Kelly's group is going to all of a sudden emerge and be the team that everybody thought they were. But I do think for next year, USC, Arizona State, and Utah would be the top 3 there. And then when you look at the North, I think Washington will be an improved team. Despite losing Chris Peterson, they were an extremely young team this year, and they're going to be a much more experienced group next year. Oregon has been doing a great job under Cristobal, and other than that, I like what Oregon State did with Jonathan Smith this year, getting to the level they did, but I don't know if they're ready to compete for the top spot.
Interesting team for me in the North next year is Cal. And I say that because if Chase Garber stays healthy, that could be a good football team. Defensively, they lose some guys, but that's Justin Wilcox's forte. But they were 7-0 this year in games that Garber started and finished. And without him, they weren't nearly the same team as we saw here in Salt Lake City. But a healthy Garbers with the pieces coming back on offense, and if they can reload on defense, they could be, I'm not saying win the North, but they could be a dangerous team in the North.
I agree with that. And, I picked Cal in the bowl game because Garbers was there in 6-0 as a starter in games he started and finished, and they look pretty good there. Now, what surprised me, Bill, was the defense down the stretch. They gave up, you look at the last 6 games of the season, they were giving up about 425 yards per game. It wasn't your typical Cal defense. I know in some of those, like the Utah game, they were playing from behind and turning the ball over. I mean, they had 6 first downs, so their defense was on the field the whole game. But I was surprised at some of the flaws the defense showed down the stretch. But you're right. Justin Wilcox is a defensive guy, and he'll have that unit towards the top again.
I'd be curious your read on Jake Bentley. He was a starter for 2 years at South Carolina before getting hurt. He's transferred to Utah. He'll be in the mix to be the starting quarterback next year. Did you like Bentley and what he showed when he was at South Carolina?
I liked Bentley at times. There were some games where he looked great, and then there were other times where the decision-making, you wondered a little bit. You go back to his second season as a starter, he had 18 touchdowns and 12 interceptions. The next year he did improve to a 27-14 ratio. But as good as he looked in some games, there were a couple of games where you left your head scratching a little bit, thinking that he didn't quite live up to his potential. But I like the fact that it's a change of scenery for him. He is an experienced quarterback, and he definitely has a talent. He was one of the top QBs coming out of high school, and maybe the change of scenery is going to be perfect for him. And let's face it, South Carolina hasn't had a dominant offense. He didn't have a great surrounding personnel with him at South Carolina the last couple of years.
He'll have a good cast this year with Utah. 4 offensive linemen returning, deep receiving core, and a deep running back group, too. So we'll see what happens. Before I let you go, who do you like on Monday night?
It's a tough game for me to call because, with LSU, they've got all these wins over top 10 teams. They played the tougher schedule. You look at the fact Ohio State outgained Clemson by 100 yards in the last game. The game's in New Orleans. They've got the special teams edge and have played the tougher schedule. But in Clemson's case, hey, they've won 29 straight games. And so you've got a team led by Dabo Swinney who is 8-1 against the spread as a dog in the postseason. He's won 6 of them outright. And Trevor Lawrence has a 21-0 ratio the last 7 games. To me, the best play for this one is the over. I think we're going to see some points on the board. And I think both offenses realize they have to outscore the other team's offense. So I think it's going to be a fun game to watch.
I think so, too. We'll have it Monday night at 6 o'clock right here on ESPN 700. Phil, you enjoy that. We'll give you a little time to reload, regroup, look ahead to 2020. And then when spring football rolls around in a month or so, we'll grab you again. Sound good?
Sounds great. We're buried in the preparation for the magazine for this year already. Less than 5 months to go till that thing goes to the press.
Well, let me know. You've got my number. If you need anything on Utah, I'm happy to help you out.
I will make sure I contact you, Bill. Have yourself a great national championship game.
Hey, you too, Phil. That's our friend.